Okay, so welcome everybody to Pure Soul. For the Ask Nikki, I wanted to, of course, extend our condolences to Jackie and kind of open it up to you guys and see if there is a topic or a question or anything that you guys would like to discuss for today. It could be about yourself personally, it could be something for the group, but um, I have some topics we can talk about, but I thought I would let you guys start today and let me know if there's something that you would like to discuss or have us think about today or talk about. I'm a little redundant, huh? I'm sorry. I could have said that in one sentence and not like 15 different ways to China, but I'm sorry about that. So who wants to start?
Not me. My head hurts right now. Somebody
Okay.
else start.
We could always
Okay,
talk
well,
about the video. The videos you did
okay.
this month.
Okay, Britt, go
Yes,
for
I
it.
watched the videos. I did.
Great. So the two videos this month were the tarot card was the King of Wands, which talks about what? Yes. Which talks about a strong, confident energy, but to be careful of this energy because this energy isn't often concerned with the details. And so sometimes you can kind of get bowled over by this super confident energy without doing the work and putting in the work. So it was both like a motivational card and also a cautionary card of, have the confidence, go after whatever you want, and know that you have this energy behind you, but also take care, make sure you're doing it compassionately and conscientiously, harnessing this energy, and make sure that you're paying attention to the details because this energy doesn't always pay attention to the details. So that kind of resonated with me a little bit. Because I am kind of flying solo at work this week. My boss is there. All of the people I report to are on a big work trip in Dallas. And so I'm kind of doing things by myself, and I've been a little unmotivated to do things. So I felt this was a good reminder that I should be re-motivated to like do stuff, but also to pay attention to the details while I do it. So that card really resonated with me this week. Did anybody else have that card resonate with them?
Britt, when I drew the card, it spoke to me in a couple different ways. One of the ways that I am guilty is like I have these great ideas and I'm going to get these ideas and I see the end result. So I approach it like toward the end result. But I get close to the end result and then I'm like I'm over it. So then I hurry up and I rush just to reach the end result, but not because I give a shit about the thing I'm doing anymore, because I've already put so much of myself. So I'm good for like 3/4 of the way. And then I blow all the details out the window. I try to do it really quick and make it finished and finish it really fast. And then I send it to Brittany and she sends it back like slow down and think about it again, as one context, so that's one of the things that spoke biggest to me is that I have this initial inspiration and I can get almost there and then I'm exhausted of it and I don't follow it through. And that's where I drop the ball on the details of the thing. So it spoke to me in that way. And then the other way was like the compassionate part spoke to me. And the things that came to me about that was it takes me a long time to like learn. And once I learn, I'm really good at what I do. But to get me to a point, it has to be practical application. Like I have to be able to do it. So I think that one of the qualities I have that comes from being kind of like a slower learner is I can teach you in so many different ways. Like whatever way works for you, like let's just go through it and talk about it and figure it out. And I don't ever feel like this sense of judgment about it. Like I don't, because I know what it feels like to not understand, because I spend a lot of my time not understanding. So I tend to draw from that card like, oh, okay, I'm doing that the right way then. And then I see the negative end of it where I'm like, oh yeah, I've dropped the ball on myself a lot too. So that's what I drew from the King of Wands. The other thing I drew from that is I know people that fit these descriptions, both on the negative side and on the positive side. The proud leader who thinks that, you know, they take all the credit for what the minions below them did, and they think they're awesome and they're very powerful, and you want to gravitate toward them because you think like you're rescued and they're going to take care of it, but it's really never them. It's always the people beneath them. And I've worked for a couple people like that, you know, that didn't give credit to the team and that took all the glory for themselves. And so it kind of struck me there, because as I was, you know, getting the visions on the card and what does it mean, and I was seeing really where I derived it from is when I like sat there and I studied it, I saw an old boss of mine, and then I saw a friend of mine, and I'm like, whoa, like, oh, I totally get that. And that's how that kind of came out. So as we're talking about it, I'm actually describing one of my old bosses to you, because that was the vision that came to me when I looked at that card. So it hit me in a lot of different ways, depending on where I was focused. If I'm focused on me, okay, yeah, I see where I'm the King of Wands and what aspects kind of pertain to me. But I also see I have King of Wands in my life, and they're not pleasant, you know, and then you know, so, and then as the King of Wands, I do put that effort of being compassionate and trying to share my knowledge and not kind of, you know, like hoard that. So I liked this card. It really prompted a lot of thought in me when I was trying to write it out. So anybody else want to share their experience of King of Wands, or how any of that kind of plays into your experience?
I felt like I was trying to figure out who the King of Wands in my life was. And when I couldn't, I was like, maybe it's me, you know, like 1 out of 5 people is insane. And if you don't know who it is, then it's probably you. I wondered if anything applied.
So do you see, and I get what you mean, but I also have to say that if you're asking, am I crazy? You're probably not crazy, because people who are crazy, they don't think they're crazy, and they don't ever think that they are, you know, they think everybody else is crazy. So.
But the experience you just described about like 3/4 and gung ho, and then you get to the end and like, that's me. In fact, I just finished writing a eulogy, and I've been writing it for a few days. Like, it's all, as soon as I get in bed and I'm finally like, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to rest, I'm like, I'm creative. Oh, I have these great things. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to write this. And I start, and then I'm like, I'm so tired, I can't. And that's what puts me to sleep. And then finally I keep going back to it, and I'm rushing. And first I let my 13-year-old niece read it, because she'll be a much nicer critic. And then I work on it some more, and then I let an adult read it, and now I'm done. But it was the same thing. So I guess I could relate to it the same way you did.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else? No? Okay. Does anybody have any, Linda, what we were talking about, and Haley, if you're listening, hi, Haley, was that we started just kind of discussing the King of Wands from the video. And then I had opened it up to see if there was any topics that you guys wanted to discuss or anything you wanted to learn about or share during the Ask Nikki before we pick a topic and talk about it. So does anybody have anything like that that they want to review or cover today about anything? No, come on, guys, give me a topic.
I was just going to say that I've been in kind of adrenaline mode where I don't sit still. So this is the one time where I actually I'm going to do the homework. I printed out everything I'm supposed to print out. And as you know, like this worksheet is about me exactly right now. So it's like, I was it was too much for me to actually answer it. But I think it's funny that like normally I'm rushing and I don't watch the videos, and then I'm kicking myself and feeling guilty. But this time, watched the videos, printed the worksheets, and I thought like just everything that's on the Beatitudes, like everything on there, like I might not have answered the questions, but just reading the questions, planting that seed in my head, like it was helpful. It was just kind of divine timing, I thought.
Yeah, I liked this. I like all the Beatitudes, but this one, they're right. It's not just about losing somebody that you love to death. It's about the end of really any situation and how we grieve, whether we lose a job, whether we lose a friend, whether we lose somebody to death. There are different times in our life, and we think like it's such a dehumanizing place to be. And so what I try, and we get time for our grief, but we can process our grief in different ways. So we can process it in the thinking aspect or from the analytical perspective. We can process it from the emotional perspective or the physical perspective. And ultimately, we end up processing grief in all three of those areas. And if we know what we're processing or where we are we in the thinking phase of this grief? Because what do I think about this grief? Because when we reflect on it and when we think about it in a logical term, we start to see, like, for example, when my mom died, and you start to think, my mom was 42 years old. How could she die so young? How did she get cancer? And you start to say, well, maybe if she wouldn't have had the surgery, it wouldn't have went airborne, and maybe this and maybe that. And so you spend a big chunk of the initial grief reviewing all the things maybe you should have done or maybe you shouldn't have done. And so that kind of overwhelms you for a long time, and you're looking more for answers. You're looking for signs from them in the physical world to make sure that they're okay, because you're in review in your brain. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, like I'm in shock. I didn't feel anything. But a lot of times at the onset of grief, you're not going to really feel the emotion because it's going to shock your brain so much that you have to think about it. So when do you actually process the emotion of that grief for whatever it is? And we'll use, like when my mom passed, of course I was sad. Of course I cried. Of course I went through all of these emotions connected to the day that she died, but I handled it okay. And in my brain, I did go through all of that thinking and what if and what if and what if. And then, a couple weeks passed and I had to get back to work. And so I was working and I was in the physical thing. And that was hard to get used to, because then I processed grief. Like first I couldn't find the answer. And then, I can't call my mom on the phone anymore. Like she's not going to answer it. So my physical life changed in a way that I didn't have this access to my mom. And that was all fine and good. But when it hit the emotional self, it was about 6 months after my mom died. And this doesn't mean I didn't cry and mourn. I did. But there was a specific moment that I needed to ask my mom a question, and I forgot she died, because my initial impulse is, oh, I got to call my mom and ask my mom. And when I called my mom and my dad answered, I was like, oh, I got to talk to mom because I need the recipe to the beef stew. And he's like, well, your mom is dead. And then he hung up the phone, and for some reason, in that need for my mom is what moved it from coping with my everyday life and dealing with the grief of her not physically being here, knowing that I don't have any answers for how this could freaking possibly happen to my mother. And that's the thinking and the doing and the coping. And then that one thing, I needed the beef stew recipe. So I called and she died. And that was it. I was shit for 6 months. Like I just was an emotional mess about my mom for 6 months. And so when we think about how do we process through grief, maybe that can happen with a job or the loss of a pet. That happened with me with Penny, and Sochi, and the ones that we've lost. It's the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, what if I would have took her earlier? What if I would have this? What if I would have that? Maybe was it that treat? What was it? And so I think no matter what experience it is, when we mourn, we're going to take it through this whole process. And that's what takes time and focus. And that's what I took when I sat down to think about, like, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And so then I thought, all right, well, during these times that I was reflecting on, just in the idea of mourning, where was the comfort in all of that grief? Like when Marissa was going through like the amputation, and it was so difficult, and we were so sad, and we were mourning. And that was a period of time where we did that. the comfort came from my friends and from my family and from the people that supported us. And every single time it blew my mind. Like I just, my friend Carla walked in the door and it blew my mind. And Linda brought us food and it blew my mind. And I couldn't believe it because I was in this time of grief and mourning, and the comfort came from the people around us and from like Marissa's doctors and, nurses and surgical staff. And so it makes us recognize that even though there is these periods of times that we are grieving, that God's hand is still in it and that we will have that comfort. Patience to me also, it says that what you pray for, you will receive, and what you ask God for, he will give you. And I think that the key to really experiencing that is the patience that's involved while you're waiting, and I find that when we pray for patience, it kind of equalizes some of the grief that we have, or I have found that it neutralizes a lot of the fear that kind of rises up in me. And that is a virtue, and it's its own angelic thing. So you can like invite her to your experience, and it really feels like it changes sometimes how the grief or the fear can kind of impact me. A lot of times when grief hits, one of the responders to grief is going to be fear, right? Because if we lose our job and that's where the source of grief is, then we have fear. How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? If somebody dies, well, who's going to give me a massage, or who's going to cut the grass, or who's going to, who am I going to call about the kids? Like there's always this insecurity that comes up, and it kind of increments the amount of fear or grief or mourning that we experience because we don't know where to look then. For the hand of God can't come through that person anymore or through that job anymore. Now you're not going to be blessed by this job to support your family, right? So then where is the next blessing? Where is the hand of God coming that this blessing is no longer available to us? But there's another blessing coming, and this can happen like in relationships. So I had a friend for a long time that was a little bit older than me. And sometimes she would talk to me and I would see my mom through her. And it was comforting to me because I would know when it's my friend talking to me or when my mom dove in there and had something to say. And I recognized it was my mom in a spirit body jump with this person. And then I don't know what occurred, but I noticed that a distance started to happen between me and her. And I was driving home one day and I had this sensation that my mom was no longer going to use this person to like peek in and say hello through humanity, because I could feel the distance happening in the friendship. And I think I even came home and told Brittany and Marissa, oh, I'm kind of sad because, first we're friends and I love her so much. And then there was this other part of our friendship that was this spirit kind of share that we would do. And now where am I going to find my mom? And then Linda comes and she's like, I think your mother made me make beef stew. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. Or she's like, yeah, your mom's here, and then there will be times that, and I love Linda and she's my friend, but there's times that she's like, Nicole. And I'm like, oh my God, you're my mother. Like, I'm hearing you. Like, I know what you're doing right now. And so there's that comfort again. There's that blessing again. There's that hand of God that he just says, we're shifting this in a certain direction. And that's one of the things that we can look for when we're in our grief or in our mourning. And sometimes, Brittany will give me a hug and it's literally my mother. Like it's literally her hug. I know what my mom feels like when she hugs me. I also know what my daughter feels like when she hugs me. And sometimes when she hugs me, it's my mother and not my daughter. And so if we can recognize those times with our loved ones, it's good. And if we can recognize, let's even apply that to like, okay, I lost my job. Now what? Where is the hand of God there? And I think, I made a video a couple years ago that's called Bridges of Hope. And that the bridges of hope are your next effort to change negative experience, to make it positive, to, how am I going to solve it? Where am I going? And the bridge of hope isn't always the destination. It's just the thing that carries you through that fear, through that grief. So you have something to look forward to, because when you get to that bridge of hope and that end result of that particular bridge, you're either at your destination or you will be gifted another bridge of hope. And when Marissa was going through all of her things, I started to notice this pattern. Like, I would get really excited because I found this supplement, and the supplement is supposed to reduce the size of tumors. And so that's what's going to happen. And then I'm going to take you for like reflexology. And I have all of these plans, and then we're going to do it. And then we go for the MRI, and I'm like, tumor's back. I'm like, shit, none of that stuff we've been doing for 3 months did anything. And so then I can sit there at that destructive end of that bridge that I thought was my destination. And now I know I'm going to sink deep here. And this is going to bring me to a grief that somebody's going to probably have to pull me out. So if I'm recognizing then that that's there, what do I do when I hit that bridge of hope that was supposed to be the destination and it's not? I need another bridge of hope. So now I go back on the internet. Now I'm researching. Now I'm looking up, oh my God, there's a berry in South America that, does this. Let me find the berry, and then I have another bridge of hope. And so when we get to this point in our grief where we're like, we don't know what to do anymore, find a bridge of hope, get on it and ride it until you either are there or you get your next one. That's where patience comes in, right? So it's kind of all intertwined. Like, yes, we have grief, but there's a way to maneuver it, and there's a way to get through it in a way that, we're not being committed to the insane asylum because we're ready to jump off the bridge. You know what I mean? So I'll stop talking and kind of turn it over to you guys. And how does that impact you? Because that's what blessed are those who mourn, for they will find comfort. That's what it means to me, right? So
the first thing I thought of was that when Jack died, well, when I first got Jack, we were trying to figure out when his birthday was, because his vet record said he was 3 months old, and I brought him to the vet, and the vet was like, this is not a 3-month-old cat, and he's going to be 20 pounds. I hope that's okay. So we asked Jack, Mom asked Jack, when's your birthday? And he said, it's your birthday. We have the same birthday, even though that wasn't real. Like, his birthday would have been sometime in December. But he said he had the same birthday as me. So every time my birthday comes around, well, I think of him. And Marissa got us this calendar for Christmas. And on the calendar on my birthday, it says Britt and Jack's birthday. And I saw it the other day, and I was like having a hard time, and because I miss him a lot. And then Ralphie, our new kitten, he comes up and he started doing this thing. It's very recent, and it's exactly what Jack does or used to do. And he reaches up my leg and he like stretches. He doesn't claw, he doesn't try to climb, he just stretches. And he never did that before, and he's been doing it a lot. And as I was sitting here, I'm thinking about Jack, and I'm thinking, like, I wonder if that's Jack peeking in through Ralphie to say hi.
So there's your confirmation then. So that does happen. And Penny does that with Dixie. Meadow does that with Blossom. Macy does it with Haven a lot, or Rosie. So there is these peak in moments. And I think that happens all the time. And it's interesting we're even talking about that aspect of it, because I've had a few sessions this week where people are like, I swear to God, I was in Jewel. And I'm like, yep, you had a body jump, like they peeked in. Like, that's exactly what can happen, is that you'll see that person, you'll know it's them, So.
Landing.
Oh, mine's not as good as yours.
What do you mean?
And no comparisons.
No, I just had like a small one that popped into my mind. So my mama passed away in 2014. She's my grandma. And it was very unexpected. She was only 68. And when I was little, for some reason, I would always like look at her hands and how they were positioned. And like we'd be sitting in the car and she'd always hold on to that handle in the car. And I remember I would sit in the back seat and just kind of like look at how her hand was positioned and just like, I don't know, it's just like a weird memory that I have. And then one day, Britt and I were driving to Indiana to visit my family. And I look over and Britt's doing this. And all I see is my mama and her hand.
Oh,
And I was just like,
yeah.
and it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I hadn't been thinking about her at all that day. So when I like looked over and saw her, it almost like startled me. And then I just started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, I saw her.
Like Mama's coming.
Yeah.
And that's I like the peek in things because it does hit you and you know in that moment. And then by the time you walk away, you're already trying to talk yourself out of it, thinking you're crazy, like that's insane, like that doesn't happen, but it does.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that happened to me. Actually, it's funny you say that because one time my grandma did that to me, and she used to be, because of the stroke, she was paralyzed on the left side. So sometimes, like, I'll be sitting there and I realize that my arm is paralyzed. And I'm looking at my arm and I know it's not my arm. I know it's my grandma's arm. And I'm like, oh, hi, grandma. And then it takes a minute, but then I'll get my sensation. But it's that moment that I look and I realize I'm not looking at my arm and I can't move it, you know? And so that's kind of like what you saw with Brittany. It's kind of the same thing, but it can happen to you too. Like they can even peek in with you, you know, and that can be physical or mental or even emotional. So
That's cool.
yeah. Jackie, I think your mom is here, but she's up above you. And she said, yes, you've been having a conversation with her and she has been responding to you in your brain. So it's not, you're not making it up. It's really real. And she wants you to know it's really real.
No,
And she hopes
yesterday, I said, like, let me know if you're talking to me because I need to know if this is your voice. If it's your voice, like, hallelujah, I have my mom back.
Yeah.
Or am I crazy
okay.
and that's just what I want to think.
Okay, so if you asked her to do that yesterday, that's what she's telling me now. Like, you're not crazy. She is talking to you. She's standing up above your crown chakra. So she is utilizing your upper three chakras to like communicate and connect with you. And she hopes that you recognized when she apologized to you.
She told me she was sorry and I interrupted her to say, don't you dare apologize for anything. You don't owe me an apology. Like, you guys know the history, but it was a beautiful thing. I saw her before she stopped talking. She tried to apologize. I wouldn't let her. And then I just started barfing the most beautiful things. We all know how angry I have been. I just started barfing all these things. And then when she did pass, all of her loved ones, we were standing around her for like 9 hours. I hugged her. I kissed her. I held her hand. Every time I was alone with her, I'm like telling secrets like, okay, you know, I'm going to make an appointment with Nikki. So we're going to talk about this and this. And it was actually beautiful. And at one point I said, look, you guys, she does not want to let go with anyone in the room because my dad did the same thing. I'm like, she's not going anywhere till we leave. So we had to convince like all the mean old lady crew, like, okay, let's go home. When we finally convinced everyone, it took 9 hours. 15 minutes later, we got the call. She was waiting for us to leave. And I'm like, every time I'm alone, I'm sorry, Mom, I'm trying to get them out of here. And I'm thinking like, all these people are judging me and thinking, oh, Jackie's horrible. She didn't talk to her mom. But you know what? I don't have to I don't have to care about that anymore because I have my mom back. Like this person, I was asking you before, like, okay, my mom's still alive, but I just want to connect with her spirit now and skip the body. That wasn't her. That wasn't her, and I knew it. And everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I was sort of like a child having a temper tantrum, like she was invasion of the body snatchers. Like, you're not my mommy, so I'm not getting close. And I feel like I almost pre-grieved When my sister called and said, well, it just happened, I took a full breath for the first time in like a year.
You
And then
know,
I
it's
was like,
and I understand that feeling because I had a similar experience like that where the grief happened before the goodbye. And that has been actually not only in a situation where somebody has passed, but also for different situations in my life, that before the goodbye, there's this period of mourning or grieving because you know it's ending. And so you kind of begin that process before the actual goodbye. So I completely understand what you mean by that, and can even say that it has applied to other scenarios in my life that aren't just connected to death, you know. So thank you for sharing that. But she does say that, and she did sit in her granddaughter's bedroom at the end of the bed. And does your niece have some kind of funny headband or some kind of bunny ears or some kind of thing with like fur on it, or like what is your mom showing me? Like I feel like I'm looking at a snapshot, but
yeah, you're looking at a picture of my mom wearing pink Easter bunny ears with her granddaughter, my niece, and me. It's our favorite picture, and we just did picture boards yesterday, and I had made extra copies to be like, here you go, Ab, I made this, you can keep it, but bunny ears.
Oh, okay, that's the vision then, and your mom is like thanking you for that then and acknowledging it.
Well, thank you, but don't worry. I will make an appointment, and I don't want to monopolize this. I was afraid to come because I was actually thinking, like, if you talk to me, I will, and I love you so much. But Mom, please don't be rude. This is a monthly
she's
meeting.
so
It's
not
for
rude,
everyone.
and she's kind of laughing at you, and she
rude,
says, "We're amongst friends here," and so. So she just wanted to make sure that you knew that you weren't crazy, and that is actually an interactive kind of connection that you're having with your mom.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, one of the things that I find that is significant when we are processing grief is to discover the place from where we are grieving. So it's normally our first impact of something. So I'm going to apply it to a job. So my last technical job, on the first day of that job, you know, and when I started working, our goal was to be at a company for 30 years and then retire. Like it wasn't any kind of like it is now where people change jobs a lot. Like when I was working, it was, you didn't want to do that. You wanted to stay at your company for 25 years or 30 years and retire with your pension. And that's kind of how it was. So I was with a company for a long time. Then I got another job. And then, you know, by this time I'm like 35 years old, and I'm like, whoa, you know, I need a job that I can be there until I retire. Like I'm 35. I don't want to be hopping around all the time. So I got hired at this place in Deerfield. And on the first day, when I walk into the job, I'm heading into the office, and my inside self says, this is your last job. Like it was an intuition. It was a sense of knowing. It was a communication from my own soul. And she's like, this is your last job. And I went home that day and I was like, you guys, I'm going to retire at this company. I'm like, I will be here for the next like 35 years. I'm totally going to retire at this company. And that was my moment of impact. Like when I think of that job, I remember telling myself I'm going to retire here. Like I finally found a job I'm going to have for 30 years. And then I got laid off 3 years later. And it shocked me. And when I grieved the position, what I was grieving was my first impact, but I thought I was going to be here 30 years. I wasn't grieving missing doing the work. I wasn't missing the people. It wasn't anything like that. It was at my first impact told me that I was going to be there for 30 years. So now this thing happening contradicts what that initial connection and impact was for the job. And it's the same with people. My first impact with you is what my expectation is of you It's what you give me. It's with that underlying thing that bonds us or connects us. And then if that's no longer there, oh my gosh, you grieve from that. Even if what separated you from the experience or the person had nothing to do with it. And so I find that to be an interesting tidbit. So does that make sense, or am I explaining that well? Did you guys get that?
Yeah. I have a question. Can you talk more
Sure.
about that initial impact, like that impact moment that you talked about? Like, when you were driving up to Wolters Kluwer and you were like, oh my God, this is the last job I'm going to have. And then you said just now that that can happen in relationships too, and that you have this moment of impact. Is the moment of impact different from your core expectation or your like soul agreement with that person? Like how does that?
It is your core.
It
It is
is
your core. So for example, when I did the exercise with myself about what is the core connection to my mom, I asked myself, what's the first memory of my mom that pops into my head when I ask myself the question about my mom from when I was a kid? Well, when I asked myself this question, I was already like 32 or 33. And the vision that came to me is when I was not living with my mom. I was already 16 years old, and I totaled my aunt's car. And I was living where I totaled the car was close to my parents' house. So I got to my parents' house and my mom opened the door and I was like, I totaled Aunt Linda's car. And she just hugged me and she started rubbing my hair. So when I asked myself that question and that came to my mind, I conceptualized that memory and said, what is it telling me? I wasn't living with my mom at the time, so I wasn't dependent on her every day. So what it told me is when I needed my mom, she was there. When I needed her, she was there. That's what that memory tells me. So when my mom passed, I didn't need her right away. I was the one taking care of everything. I went back to the Marine Corps, did my life, took care of Brittany, went to my job and did everything I did. But then the guys from my unit were coming over and they were bringing beef and I was making beef stew. So I needed to talk to my mom because I forgot how to make the beef stew. Do you put the flour first or the egg first? Then when you add the tomatoes and all of this. So I needed my mom. And when I needed her, she wasn't there. And that's where I sank for 6 months. And then I could only see, I need her here. Brittany had an ear infection. I needed to call my mom. She wasn't there. And it was like these things that, when she was there, I didn't need her every day, but when I did, she was there. And then I was coming upon experiences with a new baby where I needed my mom and she wasn't there. And it kind of prolonged that grief. So it does hit that core connection that you have with them. Whether that core was formed, young or like, for example, Britt, what's your first memory of me that pops into your head? And then where you will grieve me from.
Mhm.
Right?
Also, our lights flickered when you were talking about that.
That's my mom.
That's
Hi,
my
Mom. Yeah. So if you think of, what is your core connection to me? Your first memory of me says I'm always right. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So when I die, you'll find yourself in a decision. And you'll think, oh my God, I wish I could ask my mom about this. Because to flush it out, that's what we do. Right? And I'm usually right. But in any case, it will be when you're in the middle of making a decision or when you are questioning the next step in your journey that you'll want to discuss that. But Amanda has that, she has a very open energy. So you'll find that you're healing, and especially because it's woman with woman, your core connection then tends to be met by your partner. And because your partner is female, that represents more the core connection with your mom. If you were in a heterosexual relationship, then it would be the core connection with your father, and then the husband can help you with the core connection with the father. So when I die, you'll be just fine. because you have her, you see? And we kind of think a lot alike about some stuff. So,
I know,
you know,
I know.
it kind of works out well.
Really, Amanda's totally gonna be the person you peek in from, but I won't even know if it's you
Yeah.
or her because half of the time I'll say something to you. Sometimes you guys, I will be on the phone talking with my mom and Amanda will walk in and I will be saying something and my mom and Amanda say the exact same thing. And it's like I'm listening in stereo because they're verbatim. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
Yeah. So, but in any case, that is where we tend to do that from. So if you think about the people that you have lost that are in heaven, you know, that will help you in the grief process. If you think about that in the context of the people that are here on this earth, you know, what are your core connections with the people that you are connected to? You know, and that develops your expectation of them. That develops where you know, you love them from. So sometimes, you know, we can have a connection with somebody and have that core unit, but what if they're like really, really tired and some shit is going on in their life? If they don't fulfill your core because something is going on for them, do you recognize it? Or do you start to get angry because why aren't they showing up? Or I mean, like, they're changing. And they're not changing. It's just that at this time in their life, it's difficult for them to fulfill that core connection with you. But if you know what your core connection is with everyone, and that person isn't available to you, you still know what you have to fix for yourself. Right? So if I have, you know, somebody in my life that is my, like, this is my go-to person. I'm going to go to this person. And that's where I'm going to feel okay, safe, protected, like everything will be fine. And then that person is no longer there. Okay, I know now what I have to fix. Where am I going to go so I don't have this trigger of, oh, I'm all alone and I don't know what to do. Right? So it's not that I have to try to force this person to fulfill that core. I already know what I would be missing. So I know what to address. And this knowing what to address helps me not sink into depression, sink into confusion. You see, because I understand that. And so sometimes doing that review of your core connection with people helps you to stay even with yourself. You know, like if I know, okay, my core connection with Marissa is she makes me laugh. So if Marissa's like pissed off, I'm not right. Like I walk on eggshells. And it's not because she's mean. She's not. She's just quiet, but she's not laughing. We're not laughing. And we're not laughing. And I'm like, I'm just quiet. I don't know what to say. Because that's my core with her. And I have to realize, and like sometimes I do, I'm like, okay, I know that's me. Like that's my core. I expect her to be laughing all the time. You know, so if she's not super joyful and we're not cracking up laughing at something, then something must be wrong. So knowing that that's my core, I can give her the grace to have her own emotions and let her process through them, as opposed to trying to make sure that that core is satisfied for me. You see, because she has to get there, right? And so it allows me to be compassionate and not desperate for her to fulfill it. So then I can let her walk through what she needs to. And sometimes that happens, but sometimes we don't realize that what we feel in the distance in a relationship is really based on the core experience that we have with that person. And so then it becomes, you know, really difficult. Like I'm a spiritualist, so maybe somebody will come and then their first memory of me is, oh, I gave them all this clarity about their relative in heaven. And then 6 months later, they come back and they want that same clarity, but that relative isn't present that day. That day, it's their spirit that wants to provide that. But they think I should talk to their mom, but I talk to spirit. I do what spirit says. I can't guarantee that I'm going to talk to their mom, you see? And so that could be difficult because you want to fulfill it, but sometimes you can't do that. I'm really sorry about the dogs. Let me mute you guys. Britt, talk.
And actually it kind of was like muting it on its own. So we couldn't hear the dogs. We could just hear you coming in and out just a little bit. So it wasn't super obtrusive. I know that would be helpful for you to know for your future Zoom readings. Yeah, so one thing Amanda said to me while you were talking was she has a similar expectation of me that you have with Marissa, and that she thinks that hers with me is laughter, and it really upsets her when I'm not in a good mood, when I'm just like in a bad mood, and she gets pretty bent
Oh,
out.
it freaks me out. I'm anxious in my stomach. I'm like, what's wrong? Did I do something? Did I say something? Should I let her be? Should I not let her be? Should I help her? Should I not help her?
Say that's exactly
start
what
to
I
feel
think.
Same person.
So anxious. I'm like so anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel with Brit, and it makes me want to fix it because I'm like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
We need to be
Yeah.
laughing.
Right. Exactly. No, it's exactly right. That's so true. Totally get it.
Mhm.
Yeah. That makes me think of that other night that I was having a feeling about a thing that's happening in my life, and her impulse was to like, do that, fix it, try to address it, try to get me laughing again. But then she had an inner conflict of the solution that she perceived wasn't something she knew if she could fulfill. And then that gave her own inner conflict. So how do you manage when you know what the expectation is, what the core connection is? How do you balance that with what you actually can do? So in the moments when Marissa is sad and you can't get her out of it, how do you balance that for yourself? How do you make yourself feel okay? Because while we also experience grief and we have to deal with our own grief, we also in relationships want to account for the grief of others. And if somebody else is going through something, and how do we manage ourselves so that we can allow them to go through their own process? Because I'm sure Marissa doesn't love it if you're creeping around on eggshells all the time because you're waiting for her to feel better, or you're trying to make her feel better. So how can we separate that so that we can let the person we love go through what they're going through without it triggering something in ourselves? And I'm also long-winded, Mom. So that's where I get.
So when we are fulfilling a core, like if we know what the other person's core is, or we have that core with them, or they're fulfilling us or we're not fulfilling them. So my core with Marissa is she should be laughing, and she's not laughing. And so I can try to make her laugh, but what if it doesn't work? What if I'm unable to bring her up and make her joyful again? That means I can't fulfill the core. So what am I to do? I give her who I am, and who I am says, I'll be there. That's who I am. So I might not be able to make you laugh, but I will sit in this misery with you. Like I will take it to where you need to go, right? Because if I can't fulfill your core, I can give you who I am. And who I am is I won't leave you. I will be there. So when we don't know how to fulfill the core, then just give who you are, because that's why they love you anyway. You cinch the deal with the core, but they love you for who you are, right? And so when you find the people that you care about in that, just be who you are, because that's all they need from you at that time. And then once that's kind of balanced out a little, you will reach the core and you'll be laughing about it then at that later experience, which is the trajectory that it goes. Does that answer your question, or does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can everybody see that in their own lives? Like where that, who are you, right? And if you don't know what they need or how to make it better for them, then just be you, because that's the best thing to be for them at that time.
Could that also involve, Nikki, like just being present and just like being attentive and just hearing whatever somebody has to say?
Yes, absolutely. Holding space for them and letting them express. 100%. Yes. And that's who you are, actually, really. So it is who you are giving, like having even that idea to do that is an indication of who you are. So if you can't fulfill the core, what they need, then you just be who you are. And that helps. I would just sit on the couch with you. Right? Like I won't leave you. Right? But you'll have that space for them to express, which is good because sometimes people just need to express. If they express to me, I start talking back and answering and aligning and becoming, Miss, let me fix your problem, not allowing them even the grace for those emotions, you see? So it's all a balance. It's all just know yourself and you will know everyone.
Because that's how I am sometimes where whenever Mom or Kristen, whoever's having a bad day, I just sit and, that's all it takes is just to listen to what someone has to say. Absolutely. And then offer them a cookie or something. But,
and it's interesting that you even bring it to offer them a cookie, because as we process through our analytical self, our emotional self, and our physical self, sometimes they're thinking about it and you can get them to talking because, they're emotional. So then they finally start talking about it and they're in their brain. First, they're in their emotion and then they're in their brain because you're letting them express and talk. And then you give them a cookie and you take that energy from the mind into the body. And then there's a balancing that happens between the soul and the body because you're allowing that space for the expression of emotion through words. Emotional, analytical. They're done, give them a cookie. Take them on a walk. Give them a hug. It's the physical thing where you bring everything, then into balance between the body and the soul with those kind of reviewing it in that way, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah, because when I try to listen, I definitely notice how like some people just open up, and even as a manager, I try to hear what employees have to say, because unlike my other co-managers who are like, don't care, take it with you in Europe, goodbye. I sit there like, okay, tell me about this. How can we do to make this a little bit better? They'll tell me a quick 2-minute story. I'm like, okay, let me make some phone calls and see if we make this happen. So, and
right.
But yeah, it's just once you establish that, I believe it's just a matter of like connectiveness, or like the attentiveness, just being heard. That's all really it is.
I agree. I think that's awesome. And that is really, you're really good at that. You've always been really good at that. So I'm glad that you carry that into the different areas of your life and it's just not reserved for family, but that you do that at work and you share that with people. I think that's special. Thank you for sharing, Matt. Any other comments or questions or opinions? We have a few minutes left. Is your head still hurting so much, Sue?
It's okay. It's okay.
You got to try Excedrin migraine. It's really good.
I do take that, and that's really good.
Yeah, it is really good.
I had COVID a couple weeks ago, and so
I'm sorry.
You're talking about watching the video of the tarot card, and I know I watched it, but I don't remember it. It's like, oh yeah, it was like a kid. I don't remember any of my impressions just because I was kind of. Yeah, it took like 5 days.
I write it, and sometimes I don't even remember it. And I write it. Like I write it, I read it, I pray about it, I come up with a message, I take notes, I spend a lot of time doing that. And then we get to the day of it, and I'm like, what tarot card did I pick? What did we pick for Pure Soul? What was that about? Oh yeah, yeah. And then it all comes back, but totally the same thing. So don't even worry about that.
I haven't really been dealing with a lot of grief lately, which is thankful.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great.
My grandson's going to be 1 year old tomorrow, and they had his party last weekend. So it was a glorious family time, and I had 2 negative COVID tests 2 days apart before I got to go there. So I was good. And but it was just so joyful. And this little baby, you know, and I'm listening to everything that you're talking about, core connections and stuff. And I'm thinking, well, what is my connection going to be with him? He's just so adorable. And I always sing to him and try and make him smile. And he makes cute faces, and he does this like sniffy face thing. And I'm like, does that mean he's happy or but you know, he's such a joy. And I know they're so spiritual when they're little like that. And so I just love being around him and just looking at his adorable eyes. And I look forward to, you know, having a relationship with him for many, many years, you know, and watching him grow and trying to figure out who this little guy is. And have we hung around together before, you know, previous lives and junk like that, you know? So, yeah, so that's what's been going on with me. Yeah, I know I've been kind of out of it and I'm tired today with a little bit of headache, but things have been really, really good for me. Not too much grieving going on, but I really identified with the grieving before the end. That's happened to me a lot. You know, last year, my dad, well, no, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, my father died in 22.
Really? It's been almost 2 years?
Well, July of 22. So a year and a half.
Okay, year and a half.
You know, and but he had Parkinson's, and I really grieved the loss of him over a period of 5 years. As he kind of faded away. And so when he died, I was sorrowful and everything. But, you know, honestly, I didn't feel like I grieved that much for him because I just knew he was still here. You know, he was just in a different dimension. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I should be grieving. And I'm like, you know what? Hi, Dad. You know, I love him, but you know, I grieved the loss of the relationship over the course of the 5 years because he was himself, you know, and it's happened a lot with me, I think, and in other relationships too, you know, and some that are still around, kind of those, but so I did relate.
And I think that does happen a lot with people, like especially like if you're in a toxic relationship, you know, and you keep trying to make it better. And that could be a big part of the reason, like why we stick around, because we are in that process of grief. We're just trying to make sure, you know, and I think that could be a big contributor to why people hold on a little longer. Sometimes it's to get through the grief process before the goodbye. So it's just such a revolutionary kind of thought to think of it kind of like that. To me is like, wow, yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that, working through that.
Yeah. So, well, everyone, thank you so much for participating today in the Pure Soul, and thanks, Britt, for getting us started and everything. I appreciate it, and I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.